Welcome to the Mad Mirror podcast, where we explore the challenges and victories to building sustainable lifestyles as independent makers, small artists, and entrepreneurs. I'm Miriam Rachel, the host of Mad Mirror, and today we'll be talking with our special guest, Kora Boisvert. Did I say it right?
You did. Good job.
A professional cellist, maker, and artist on how she designed her lifestyle around her and her family's needs. Let's get started. Kora Boisvert is a music teacher, nurse, and former homeschooling mama of 3 grown children. Kora performs with the Roseville String Ensemble and the Firefly Trio, and she loves to learn new things. She has raised her family in a way that has encouraged and enabled her kids to continue their own education as young adults. Hello, Kora, and welcome to the Mad Mirror podcast.
Thanks for having me, Miriam. Good morning.
Now, Kora, you're a musician and a maker, so tell me about all that you do. And I know there's a vast amount of things.
There are a vast amount of things. I'm curious about how to do nearly everything, so I'm always trying to learn something new. I really like fiber arts especially, so I spin and weave and knit and sew historical clothing. Pretty much if it's out there, I want to do it. Nail binding is next on my list. We'll see who wants to teach me that.
What is it called?
Nail binding.
What is that?
Yeah, it's like some people say it's a predecessor to knitting. Other people say it was congruent, but in a different area of the world. I don't know. The jury might still be out. But either way.
That's cool. Okay.
I want to know how to do it.
Right?
So, yeah.
Right?
Dyeing fiber with natural materials has my attention right now. So I have a freezer full of dried flower petals and rhubarb leaves and pondering what to do with those. But I have a little spinning to do before we can experiment.
I love that. That's awesome. I totally understand. Like, I always want to start like new projects before I've finished other projects. So then I end up with just a plethora of projects that I haven't completed.
So many projects.
So many projects.
My husband learned a while back that an ideal birthday present for me is to just give me a kit that includes the tools and an instruction book for whatever I'm currently obsessed with, and that's worked out really well. So I have kits for watercolor painting and block printing, spoon carving, you name it. There's a bin for everything.
That's amazing. So
so many things. I do. I just want to learn everything to do with my hands. I'm a lifelong learner, and as a musician, I play cello and guitar, a bunch of different places. I played with the Roseville String Ensemble for almost 20 years and the Firefly Trio for about 5.
Awesome.
And I play whenever I can all over the place. Sometimes I play in church, sometimes at coffee shops or nursing homes. I play with my son a bunch of different places, or if we're at a historical event, then my daughter and I will play Irish whistle sometimes, and that's kind of fun. Playing with my kids is one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, like you're able to like not just like create, but like to do that with your family.
Yeah, I mean that's the dream, and I really get to do that thing, so
yeah.
I love that.
That is really living the dream. Tell me more about the historical reenactments. How did you get into that?
Well, it came with a guy. So about 30 years ago, we met at our mutual place of employment, and he was starting to get into historical reenacting. And when we got married, I could either do this thing that he loved with him and learn how to love it, or I could say, good luck making all these memories that you love without me. So I jumped in. I'm so glad. It's one of the best things we've done in raising our children is to do it in a way that's more experiential, and they all love history. And that's really exciting for me because I think they're better citizens and humans with more of a hands-on, we can talk about history, we can talk about living in certain ways, but when you have to go and actually try it on and make the clothes to go with it, it's a whole different thing.
What a hands-on like learning experience too. Like you're not just like, oh, let's open up our textbook. So when you sew and make like the period costumes, and in a way it's almost like not a costume because that was clothing. Yeah. That's how people dress. So How did you get into that? I mean, I'm a sewer, but like that takes so much like skill, and they didn't have necessarily like zippers and, things like that.
It's a steep learning curve. I'm learning. I'm a beginner at it. I mean, I've done it for a long time, but I have people in my life that do a better job, and they're always helping me. They're directing me towards patterns or helping me understand different ways of how things were put together, or who at different time periods had access to different clothing or prints or fibers or ways of making clothing. And that's it's always fascinating to me how much fiber and the women's economy that was based on, in many ways, around fiber.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is an underlying feature to so much of history.
Oh, yeah. Wow, I never even thought about that. That's amazing.
That may be a whole different talk.
Right. Right. And you also just recently attended a sheep and wool fest, which I didn't even know that was the thing. And like right now I'm not allowed to go there because I would just want to buy all of the yarn and all of the things and do all of the things.
Well, I do too, but I am allowed to go there. I just don't generally spend that much money.
Yeah.
So I bring my spinning wheel with me and I sit in the middle where there are other spinners and wait for them to tell me, oh, you shouldn't be doing that thing, or giving me pointers. I've learned a lot that way. But the Sheep and Wool Festival is around Mother's Day weekend, usually on Mother's Day weekend every year at the Washington County Fairgrounds. And it's big. It's well attended. There's workshops, there's vendors, there's food carts. I mean, it's just everything. It's very fun for me just to go and see what other people are making. I take a lot of notes for what I want to try myself, and then sometimes I can get patterns or supplies or just talk to people who are equally geeking out about fiber of all sorts. There's animals there. You can pet the bunnies and the llamas and all that. They do shearing.
Oh, that's amazing.
I highly recommend it. It's like $5 to get in, and it's just a lot of fun for someone who has any interest in making the things with anything fiber.
That's amazing. Yeah, definitely. Next year you'll have to let me know about
Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah, Mother's Day weekend. I'll have to put that on my calendar. How did you get into that? Like, was that something that you grew up with?
Oddly enough, I was asked to do a demonstration of spinning and weaving for Vacation Bible School one year, and I neither spun nor wove. And they said, that is not a problem. We have fleece for you here. We had recently gotten a loom, but hadn't really used it, and I didn't know how to spin. So my husband made a drop spindle because he does things like that. And I taught myself over the weekend how to spin the thing. And,
Wow.
prepared the wool as best I could with some dog brushes. That worked because carders are basically just big dog brushes.
Right.
And then I strung up the rigid head loom and brought it over there, and I taught myself in front of all of these hundreds of kids. And then I brought stuff for them to try because hands-on learning is kind of my jam.
Oh, absolutely.
So when I go to a historical event now, I have a whole bunch of sets of dog brushes so that people can get their hands on wool and actually see what it takes through the process of going from dirty, fleecy stuff to an actual thing. And that process is, I love sharing that excitement with other people. And it's so interesting to me how few people actually know how you get from animal to I'm wearing this.
Totally.
So walking them through the various ways to do that, I just love it.
That's amazing.
Maybe more than they do, but I do love it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think about, even with tie-dye, like one of the things that like I face a lot is fast fashion, and just in general, there's like that disconnect, from like where are our clothes coming from? And I think that, especially like before we had fast fashion, like so much work went into it, and like, thousands of years of learning and figuring out these processes. And it kind of blows my mind, honestly.
Yeah, I've way too much to say about that, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I've been reading a whole bunch of books that involve just fiber. Not just fiber, but how it has been really wound around the history of women, and how that in itself winds around the history of all of us, especially pre-colonial and beginning with the revolution, how it just dictated a lot of history.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's essential because, like, especially with like winter and stuff, like we have to be able to, like clothe ourselves so we don't die. Like, important part
So
of
we
survival.
don't die. That is a very important part. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I love utilitarian art. I tried stamping cards for a while, which is fun, but then people look at this thing you spent 3 hours on and they're like, why, thank you. And then they recycle it, and it's just hurtful.
Yeah,
So
totally.
if you can use it again, that makes me really happy, like deeply just satisfied that someone has something they can use that I made. It contributed to their life in one way, something important. But one of the first utilitarian things I made, I still laugh at. It was a tent I made out of sheets and some dowels, and it was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But I loved it because I made it and I could use it.
Right.
I would not recommend it. It was not waterproof. It was not practical in any way, but I did it. And I was just so proud that I did a thing.
Right. Well, and I suppose all of that is just, it's a learning curve. So
And I was in middle school, so my expectations were, lower than they are now.
Right. I love it. I love it. So speaking of your childhood, so what was it like? It sounds like you grew up making things and having music in your life, and
Lots of messes, yeah. We had a piano. My mother played the piano a lot, so that was modeled for me. I started piano lessons with my neighbor when I was about 6 or so, and added on other instruments, handbells and all the things. I've always loved to learn all of the things. But then with a music ed degree, I got to learn most of the other instruments that we play in a band or orchestra, and then added on synths. My husband actually taught me guitar when I was 19.
Oh,
and that was
I love
one of
that.
my later instruments to add on. And then I make sure as a music teacher that I'm always learning a new instrument that makes me slightly uncomfortable.
That's such a good mentality too.
Because I need to remember freshly what it feels like I'm going to play this and it's not going to be pretty.
Right.
It's just not. But I'm going to do it anyways because it's part of the process. And continually stamping on my own pride like that makes me a better teacher. It keeps my empathy and compassion a little higher, especially for my adult students.
Right? Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think about too, like when I was getting my music degree, I mean, we had to learn all of the instruments, and like I felt so bad for my roommates and fellow like people that were also music majors on our floor, like especially like clarinet and oboe. I'm so sorry.
Well, when I finished my degree, I was around 30 years old. And when I took my brass methods course, no one told me the basics of brass or percussion instruments. They didn't say how they were different from strings and harmonic sequences. And there were so many basic things that just were not covered. And so when I started playing trumpet, it was an experience that I never want anyone to go through again. And it was so wretched that the other older student in class and myself, we were the only string players, by the way.
Good for you
We
guys.
had the giggle fit so badly. We could barely breathe, and we were kicked out of our class. We had to remain in the hallway for 10 minutes while we composed ourselves, and it really did take that long because it was so bad.
That's so
it did
funny.
improve over time, and I do love the trumpet, but yeah, just some basic parts were missing, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, and stereotypically, I think about like the string kids are always like, you know, the so-and-so like good kids compared to like band kids. Like
Results
in
may
public schools.
vary, but yeah,
Yeah. That's fantastic. You guys were just rebels.
we were something.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. No, I definitely have experienced those giggle fests myself. So
You just don't expect it in your 30s in a class of 18-year-olds. Right. That was a surprise.
So in addition to music, did you grow up, you know, with like, you know, all the fiber art stuff that interests you?
Me and my mother sewed and mended things, but that just was a dawning thing over time. No, I don't think it was. It was just more, I was always making something, and it just kind of got over to that over time.
So like, did you grow up with like a sewing machine, or did you end up getting one like later in life, or?
I got one later in life. Like, we had one in our home. My grandmother sewed a lot, and I would sit and sew with her. She made a lot of clothes and doll clothes for us, and I loved how she would have an idea in mind and then just made it. So I started making doll clothes and stuffed animals and things when I was little, just for fun.
When you got into more of the fiber arts, did you kind of just acquire, you know, tools and supplies yourself?
Well, we started with a loom, and my husband and I strung that up together for the first time. And, you know, like I said, he made me a drop spindle. And then we just improvised because we didn't have a budget for that. And just as we could slowly acquire things, we did. But I made myself drop spindle an entire fleece before I ever used a spinning wheel. And I wanted to get tension down, and more I just decided to, and then I was stubborn about it. But I'm glad that I did, because now the tension part is easy, and just doing the treadling and at high speed is not so stressful.
Well, and gosh, stringing a loom, like that is a job and a half.
Oh, it takes forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially a very large one, like my barn loom that it would take up this whole room.
Yeah, I believe
I have
it.
a room for that. We call it the loom room.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, my aunt does looming, and I mean, it takes her probably 2 weeks between when she finishes a project to when she restrings it, because it's just, and she always has like help and everything, but it's like keeping track of each individual like thread, and oh my goodness.
Yeah, we had an amazing opportunity. My daughter and I went down to Missouri, and we spent a week just kind of apprenticing with a historical weaver down there. And he showed us what to do, learned the ropes literally, and we wove the entire week. So I came home with a very complicated pattern and a queen-size blanket and wool, and it's one of my very favorite things. Like, we spent the entire week weaving.
Wow.
And I made all the mistakes, and I wanted the hardest thing. I do this with everything. I picked the hardest thing I could do so that when I got home, everything else would feel easier.
Oh, yeah.
When I didn't have someone standing behind me saying, actually, that goes over there. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, and a queen size blanket. Wow, that's huge. Yeah.
Huge.
That's
I was
amazing.
literally putting the last stitches in it on the
Yeah.
binding as we were about to walk out the door. It took the entire time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell me a little bit more about cello. So you learned cello after you started piano with your neighbor. And then did you play in like any ensembles as a kid?
Just the little ones that were put together by my orchestra director.
Did you come through the public school system?
I did. I went through a bunch of different schools, but I was in the same district from 5th grade on, and so I was with consistent teachers. Like the first teacher that I had for cello, his daughter was my first private cello teacher.
Yeah.
And then he was my high school orchestra director as well.
That's awesome.
So I had a lot of continuity there, and that was great.
Oh, yeah.
A very
continuity.
solid program.
Yeah, I came through the public school system also. And I mean, honestly, I think a lot of my passion for it was because I came through that program and saw how amazing it was, sort of that camaraderie that comes with it.
Camaraderie is huge. It's everything in middle school. That's actually a lifesaver in middle school.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Those are my friends now. Like,
Me too.
I still have so many of my friends from 5th grade on when I came into the district that music has kept us together. Some of us are still playing together. In fact, a couple of years ago in the Rosa String Ensemble, my stand partner from high school, she got to sit next to me for a while, or I got to sit next to her for a while, and that was so sweet. I just loved it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, it's same thing. I'm still friends. I still play with some of my friends that I, started in 4th grade with for orchestra.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Like someone who's observed your life and shared it with you in that sort of everyday way that you only have with music when you go through grade school and high school together.
Right.
Some of us even went to college together.
Right.
We just kept on going.
Oh, I love that. Actually, me too. Me too. Isn't that funny how that works? And I think also, I mean, besides the fact that it's like a team sport, basically, I mean, if you started in 5th grade together, you also like grew as musicians together,
Absolutely.
Which is such a cool skill to have, like built around a community,
Yeah, one of my very dear friends from high school, he lives in my daughter and son-in-law's neighborhood, and I get to play with him every once in a while, and it's just so sweet to still have him around and in my life. He's just a great guy, and I love having him close to my daughter and granddaughter and son-in-law. He even snowblowed their driveway a few times this winter, and I don't know, I just feel like he's there keeping an eye on him.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And so now, is your husband also a musician?
He is, and a maker. He makes all the things. Specifically, he makes the uilleann pipes, the Irish bagpipes, and Irish whistles. He makes a whole bunch of other stuff as well. He'll go out to make a bagpipe and accidentally make a metal mosquito sometimes, but so results may vary. But yeah, he makes a lot of things. He also plays guitar and sings, and that's one of my favorite things. He was actually singing for us the other day, and I looked at my niece and said, "Now you see why I had to marry Uncle David." She's like, "Yeah, totally." She gets it. She gets it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he makes just about anything. He hates it when I say that, but he really can. He's magic. He looks at it. He has this 3D engineering mind. He's like, "Oh, that's how that goes together." And then he just makes it appear. I don't understand it, but I appreciate it. So
that's amazing. And also like being like, I know how to make bagpipes. Like, I just think that there's not a lot of people that fall into that category.
10. There are 10 in the world. He is one of them.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I'm really proud of him.
Yeah.
And nothing leaves the shop if it's not perfect. It becomes a drawer pull or something if it doesn't meet his criteria. And we have a lot of really expensive drawer pulls. But yeah, he's sold on every populated continent, and he's kind of amazing.
That's amazing. So is there a bagpipe in Antarctica?
Anywhere that's populated.
Yeah. That's amazing.
He's very crafty. He makes all the things. So when we're at historical reenactments, he'll bring stuff. If he's made some knives or birch bark containers, they're kind of like Tupperware. They're air and water tight, and that's kind of cool. What doesn't he make? He just makes all the things. Like he made most of our house, the new parts of it, and
wow,
just does stuff.
That's so cool. So, like, if you think about it, like, you are literally living in a house that your husband made that you are now, like, creating new artwork in and, like, skills.
Yeah,
and
when I got my barn loom, I tried putting it together, but there were no directions. For some reason, the internet could not help me in any way. And I'm like, surely I can figure this thing out. Well, I could not because it was missing some major components. So we did a little investigating, and he went out and just made the parts and I'm sure I take this for granted to a great extent because I've been with him for 30 years, but he just does the stuff.
I know that you homeschooled your kids. So when did you decide to homeschool, and how did you kind of come to that decision?
Before we were married, I had some very positive examples of homeschooling in my life, and I was trying to learn as much as possible. Not because public schooling or private schooling were poor options, but because this is what we felt that we were supposed to do. So before we were married or had kids, it's what we'd already decided on. And then when my oldest presented herself, we found out that a traditional school setting was not going to work best for her specific needs. And so we just did that. And every year, for 18 years, we reevaluated. Is this what God wants us to do this year? And if it was, then we did. And if not, then we didn't. So we actually had the kids home through 8th grade, each of them. And I was ready to go through the beginning of college, but we didn't feel that's what we were supposed to do. So, yeah, 18 years.
So with 3 kids in different grades, would you all kind of like work on the same thing, or sometimes you would work on maybe like a project together and then split up? Like
Yes, and.
Yeah. Yeah. Right?
Because homeschooling doesn't take the entire school day.
Right.
I was able to put my 2 daughters, who were 18 months apart, into similar things. Mm-hmm. So activities together, and while they were in those activities, then my son and I would do the stuff that he specifically needed the most attention on.
Yeah.
And then if we were doing Spanish, the kids would all be in one clump somewhere, and we'd be working together. We did a lot of things where they could just put in what they could take in at the time. And totally lost my train of thought for a second.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. So I also did daycare for someone my son's age, and that for me was a huge benefit because it made me be very structured in ways that I might not have been, and intentional in ways I might not have been.
Yeah.
So we had learning times set aside, and I planned way ahead before he hit kindergarten of what we were going to do. So when he was 3 years old through 5 years old, it kept me on track.
Yeah.
And so while I was working with them, I had my girls doing their own independent things and vice versa. So we kind of took turns with that.
Yeah, nice. Well, and so much like self-directed time too to, kind of explore and learn things. And
yeah, there's a lot of downtime built into what we were doing for them to do their own learning and explore their own interests. Right. So that was on purpose.
Right. That's fantastic. So when you went into homeschooling as a parent, did you have like a philosophy, or was it kind of just sort of make it up as you went along, or a little bit of column A and column B?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much of a philosophy as a conviction that this is what God wanted us to do, and we were going to figure it out. I had a lot of great mentors, a really good, solid community around me that was encouraging and informative and helped me along when I felt stuck on something, and great resource for, hey, you can borrow this and take a look at it and see if it works for you. So we tried a bunch of things. I made an outline before I ever had kids of what I felt I was responsible for and the adults that were going to come from our life together.
Yeah.
And that was one of the best things that I've done. It made me, as a very young person, since I had my first child when I was 20, made me as a very young person think through how I wanted to parent. And I viewed my raising of children in retrospect and planned backwards from there. And that took a lot of work for me, but what I wanted them to do is have basic conversation skills with people of all different age levels.
Yeah.
And in more than one language. And be well-read and be critical thinkers. Be comfortable doing basic childcare.
Yeah.
Because life skill. Have traveled enough to be comfortable doing so and want to do it more. Be skilled and responsible in managing money.
Yeah, what a skill.
Huge thing.
Skill.
Understanding the reasons for their faith and being able to grow it on their own.
Yeah.
And not just take what we were telling them, but be secure in what they believe and be able to live that out.
Yeah.
Know how to care for a home and cook food and just some simple life skills like that. And so I really planned our curricula and how we even approached teaching them from the far end.
Like for me, I think about like if I were to list all the things as a parent that I want to make sure that I teach, that's like it's overwhelming almost, you know?
It's overwhelming. Yeah. I mean, I did follow my kids' interests and their own developmental levels and abilities with everything we did as well. But that was just the overarching structure that I could break down to their tiniest component pieces from when they're 3 onward, and just took little bites of it over time. And the things that we didn't get to, we got to some of, and they're able to continue learning on their own. So I had to use a lot of trial and error for what would work best for each of them. It had to be hands-on, interactive, and adaptable. One of my kids is an auditory learner. One is very kinesthetic. The other's really visual. So
You got everything in there.
everything in there. And besides, they were different ages. So I mixed a lot of stuff, a lot of read-alouds where they could take from that where they were at developmentally and make their own pictures. And that was helpful. Lots of really big, messy projects and nature study. And one time a duck was killed by a car in front of our yard. And so we just paused everything else we were doing and threw some plastic down in the office and did a little dissection. And then we also got to try to hatch her eggs in an incubator, too.
Oh,
just borrowed
wow.
one. But I have a community of people where borrowing an incubator isn't an impossible thing.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And again, like, it's sort of like you have that flexibility to be able to, like, deviate from, you know, whatever the lesson plan was and, you know, like, learn an opportunity, you know, that's right there. And
yeah. Well, I think it was essential that my husband was fully in support of it. I don't think it's possible to homeschool well without both parents being on the same page.
Oh, absolutely. So I know that you said that you did childcare while you were homeschooling.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like so much, but like at the same time, like it makes sense, you know, because like if you're already doing all these things and have, you know, all these like little projects plans out and you've got like a schedule, like it's just kind of like, you know, we'll just, you know, fit you in here. And
yeah, my priority was to hand raise my kids. So I picked things that would allow me to do that to the best of my ability. My mother had a daycare when I was growing up. So, I mean, we always had art projects everywhere and art supplies everywhere. And I definitely took advantage of that. But then when I started doing daycare, I took over her daycare and she went back to grad school.
wow,
So
that's amazing.
It's kind of a family thing we do, I guess.
yeah, you just kind of pass it around and
Yeah, I couldn't have afforded to homeschool if I didn't have some income. So for 12 years, I had an in-home daycare, and we had up to 10 kids at a time. And then I also taught between 1 to 40 students during that time.
for cello.
Cello, violin, guitar, piano.
Awesome.
Whatever's needed. Results may vary.
Yeah.
We did respite care for a while with kids with special needs, and we had a number of foster children over time. And we had 43 exchange students live with us
Wow.
over about 20-some-year period.
Wow.
But that's what we did, and that's how I could be home with mine.
yeah, absolutely.
Is our home was a tool, and having an open door. We've had 50 people live with us total.
That's amazing.
over
I got
time.
goosebumps from that. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. It was something that was modeled for me when I was young, and it's been an essential part of just being a homeowner, is knowing that it's something we have to share. And it's also a tool for me to support my family, too.
Absolutely. I feel like, and I think you totally get this too, is, you know, like having that experience, like when you bring somebody into your house, like you're also like enriching with like, you know, things that with their wisdom and their possible skills.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Yeah, we had exchange students when I was young, and so for me it was a natural thing that I couldn't afford to bring my kids to the world, but I could bring the world to my kids.
Yeah. We had exchange students, and I grew up with that. And I was very lucky. I did get to do an exchange program where I got to go, and I studied abroad in Germany when I was in high school. And it was, I mean, just on both ends, like having somebody staying with us and then also like going. I mean, it was amazing. And I know not everyone gets to do those opportunities, and I feel very privileged to have been able to do that. But even just bringing, you know, like an exchange student into our home. I mean, I learned so much just from that. And I was only in high school. I'm sure I learned more than I think I did too. I guess what I'm trying to say is when you sort of take control of parts of your education like that, I feel like, you know, it's sort of like everyone in this big circle of like community benefits. And even like with your mom going back to grad school, like, you know, with each other supporting each other, we can accomplish so many great things and learn so many new skills.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of variety
So what would kind of your weekly schedule look like? One of the reasons I wanted to have you on my podcast is because I remember when I was playing with the Roseville String Ensemble, one of the things that we were talking about once was how you were able to build in time for yourself so that you could learn new things and learn new skills, and that you were learning along with your kids. And I think that when you told me that, I was at a point in my life where I was super burnt out from being an orchestra director in a public school. And, I was still like a pretty young mother at the time. And I was like seeking that balance so that, I wasn't just, giving all the time, but also like taking in that fulfillment of, doing things that I wanted to do too.
Yeah.
So how did you eventually come to create that schedule?
It was definitely eventually. At first I didn't have or create time just for things that I wanted to do, and that wasn't healthy. It wasn't working out for anyone.
Yeah.
So I actually brought one of our weekly schedules just for one of my kids. It came down a lot to being intentional. I'll have you take a look at that whenever you want to, but everything was written down that we were going to do. And it's not that we couldn't change that, but I had to be intentional about when things were going to happen. When they were really young, our formal learning times were really short and simple, and they were mostly games and read-alouds and nature study, things like that. But, eventually it branched out to include all the things here, math and science and social studies and all of that, but also exercising is part of our regular day. What could we do that they could keep doing when they were older? Art and music. But when they were doing those things, then I was doing those things too. And it just ended up having to be written down. So if I didn't plan time for what I love to do, I'm not going to do it. There's always someone else that needs something else. So if it's not on there, it's just not going to happen. And, learning with my kids. So if they were painting pictures of apples and I was painting apples too. And if they were learning Latin, I was studying declensions right next to them. So if I was interested in something, I would teach it to them. As long as it met those overall goals of what I wanted them to have, then that made sense. And in the summer, it's just the biggest thing that I ever decided to do for myself. And one of the best things is that I had a mama's homeschool day every week. On Tuesdays in the summer, my friends would come over with their kids. We would let the kids be feral in the backyard.
Yes.
And we would just learn something until lunchtime.
Yeah. Well, and it's so good for the kids to have that time too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we would learn how to make something or do something new, 5 different ways to make yogurt, or we would glue pennies on a bowling ball to put in the garden, or just anything we were interested in. How do we knit round things? Sometimes I would have someone come in that was an expert at what they were doing, and they would show us. So one of my adult violin students came and demonstrated oil painting. She's incredible. One of my favorite painters, actually. And she just came and talked to us and showed her stuff. And I don't ever aspire to be that good at oil painting, but I was really inspired to give it a try. And I think that's the whole point. So, it really is one of the best things I ever did, was make that intention. And even when I didn't have time in the regular school year for something, I'm like, but Mama's homeschool day is coming. And I could just put it in a bin for now,
right?
Mentally and physically. So
right.
I would have long stretches sometimes without having an ability to do what I wanted to do or have margin for things for myself. But then you'd find me boiling sweaters in the kitchen at midnight or something.
Yes. Oh, I relate to that.
Or working in the garden while I was quizzing my kids on state capitals, multitasking for the win. Because it had to happen. It was going to come out somewhere.
Right. But. And I think one of the other things that I really like about what you're describing is, I think, especially in sort of the way our society is set up, especially with sort of this 9-to-5 mentality, and like you go to school and you learn from the teacher, and then like the skill is acquired and you go on to the next step. I feel like the thing that is often missing is that everyone has something that they can teach, and like you're learning from your kids and with your kids, and I almost feel like that's a skill that's missing sometimes, or that it's starting to become not as common. And to be able to put that time aside for yourself too, and to like learn together with other people. Obviously being a mom is like a full-time job always, but moms that don't work, that still don't have that time built in to find something for themselves to learn and do that they've wanted to do. And
often I observe stay-at-home mothers having the hardest time setting that time aside because so much focus is on the kids. And I think it's especially essential when you're a little more isolated because of that, to be just spending time with other people and carving out that space, making it a priority. So,
right.
And I had to really make sure that I was in balance because I was noticing imbalance in my life. So this was recommended to me, and I've been doing it ever since. I just draw 4 squares, draw across on a piece of paper, and in each of them they have different quadrants are labeled, mental, physical, spiritual, and one other one, emotional or relational. And then in each one I would put down the things I was doing to try to be healthy in each of those areas. And so over time I can just make sure that things are in balance. And if they're not, I can see, well, that's because I'm not doing anything. I'm not learning anything new. No wonder I'm feeling like I'm shriveling up, if that makes any sense to you. So like for the mental category, I would put in improving my Spanish skills or doing continuing education for my EMT licensure or learning pressure canning or lucette cord making, something like that. And if I didn't have some things on that list, I would feel like there was less of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or in the relational category, if I wasn't making time for friends or calling my grandmother regularly or volunteering at the nursing home, if I wasn't putting those things in that made me who I wanted to be, then I was not in balance. But it kind of laid it out for me in a way where I could see where the problem was a little more clearly. And check in that, am I just sitting on the couch? I'm prone to just sitting on the couch. So
me too. I feel that.
Yeah. It doesn't mean everything was always in balance. In fact, I don't think there was ever a time when everything was in balance. But I knew what I was aiming at.
Yeah, I think like one of the things too with balance is, it's something that I feel like I'm always striving for. And even though my life has so much more balance than it did, even when I was in high school, I don't think I had like close to anything that was balanced because I was so like passionate about doing music and teaching music. I think I've always been just struggling with balance. College was like play your violin and don't ask questions, it was pretty intense.
I understand 10 hours a day of cello. Yeah, I get it.
Yep, you totally get it. And then like while you're finishing up college, like I went into education, so not only was I finishing up school, but I was like doing the student teaching, which is so much work. And there just was never that like stopping of movement ever. And it was just like, keep going forward, keep going forward. I loved what I did. I taught full time while I was in college, which was a feat and a half, but I did not sleep. And there were a lot of times where I was eating a peanut butter and jelly, in the car or, while I was doing a lesson. But, it was really what I wanted to do. And I was so passionate about it. But now that I'm older, I just don't have as much energy. And I think, it's fair to say that like your needs change. And
absolutely.
I think for me, like I need a slower pace of life. And it has been so life-changing for me to really just like embrace that. And one of the things I love about your schedule too is that you said to me earlier was if it's written down on the schedule, if we don't get to it, that's fine. But then I know that we didn't get to it so that we can do it tomorrow or the day after. And it's there to like remind me.
Yeah.
And I relate to that so much because I like make lists for everything. Even like in my journals, a lot of them are just lists of things. They're not even today I did this. And, it's like, here's what I want to do. Here are the things that I need in my life. I know for us, we live a slightly less structured life generally, but I think having it written down, if it's written down, we can circle back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, if I know that I missed something, I don't have to worry about missing everything. It's self-limiting. I know what I didn't get to, and that just clears my mental palette. So I'm not trying to carry it all the time. Otherwise, that's overwhelming.
Right, absolutely. And then, like you said with like the duck that you guys dissected. And
maybe not our most shining moment, but yeah.
Right, but you know.
They remember it.
Right, they remember it. And then you got to like try to incubate the eggs. And, like I think like of opportunities, especially living in like a co-housing situation, if we have a really nice night outside, sometimes it'll be, like, hey, let's do like a bonfire in the courtyard or.
I love that. Yeah, no, I'm living vicariously through your community.
Oh,
I love when you post stuff about that. I think it's so sweet.
Yeah.
We are gardening today.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, things come up, like we have no control over like when like the cherries are going to be ready to pick. And, those are the thing where there's like a window. And if we don't do the picking and canning them, then we have to let it go for the season and wait until the next year. And so I love having that flexibility to be able to stop and do those things. And I know obviously like with my daughter being in public school, we don't always have that freedom, but there's so much more freedom than when I was teaching in the public schools. And I'm so grateful for that. Now, I know that you live in a neurodivergent household.
We do.
And I mean, we are also living that life. So tell me a little bit about that and how that also influenced your lifestyle.
Oh, how did it not?
Right.
One way that immediately springs to mind is our schedule. Like my husband and one of my daughters, they naturally fall asleep around 2 a.m. From 11 months on. She fell asleep about 2 a.m. Yeah. So there were just things that were not going to work for us. With 2 people who were basically nocturnal, we were not going to be starting algebra at 7 a.m. That was not going to fly. But my 2 other kids were early birds. So I had to have independent work ready for all of them at their own levels that they could do on the times when it worked best for their brains.
Yeah.
That was a big challenge for me, but it worked out. One of my daughters would do more before 6 a.m. than I might do all day, so I just had to front load that. We had to use an incredible amount of trial and error, the right learning approaches, the right curricula, the right experiences, and teachers for certain skills for them, and my overall parenting style. What worked for one did not work for the other at all. I just kept trying to learn more and do better. Significant part of my personal library is parenting books, ADHD, autism, how to raise challenging children, all of that. And I just have so much more to learn. As we as humans learn more about brain development and exceptionalities, it makes me wish I had known so much more earlier. Maybe I could have done better. And we made so many mistakes, and we just kept trying to learn from them.
Yeah.
Sometimes that went better than others, but I apologized a lot, and I keep doing it. The more I find that, I probably should have done this with you for what you needed, I can just keep apologizing, and that's all we can do, because there are significant challenges with social skills and really, really, really big emotions. So we just took time after social activities to do social autopsies. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Tell me more.
We kind of broke down, how did this go? If it didn't, where did it start to go wrong? And what part of that can you own, and how can we learn to do better? Right. Or what went really well this time, and what made that go well? Yeah. That just takes a lot of time, lots of introspection and discussion, and everything just takes more time.
Yeah.
With neurodivergence. So checking up on things, explanations, endless explanations.
Absolutely.
If I'm going to buy in, it means you're going to need to know why. And that just takes a while. Maintaining order and safety and peace, and then regrouping when we lose our order and safety and peace. And that's just going to happen. It's a given in a home with exceptionalities.
Right.
So, but neurodivergence also meant that we were in a home full of creativity.
Absolutely. So much creativity.
From parents to kids and everything in between. We just always had stuff going on that we're loving learning. And we've tried to encourage that while also teaching the life skills that they needed. So like in 8th grade, my youngest had to write 100 essays because his teacher was really mean. And that teacher was me. Yeah. Oh. So he was given specific parameters that he had to stay within, but he could pick any topic at all. And he was obsessed with military history. He still is. He just graduated with a degree in basically history.
Wow, that's amazing.
With different specialties within that. And it's what he loved, and it's what he loves. So he did. And I learned so much because he got to go with what he was passionate about. Yeah. And his library in his room is extensive. I think he has over 1,000 books in there.
Wow, that's like goals, man.
Yeah, yeah. He was actually he used his own library as reference in his last major paper.
That's
for
amazing.
His degree, and that I think he was pleased with that he didn't have to go anywhere for that. He just looked to his left. He's like, now wait a minute, I have something on that. But my daughter, she really wanted to do things on outer space. Well, I didn't know a ton about outer space outside of science in high school. So
Yeah.
I learned so much through them. And that's such a powerful position for kids to be in, to be the resident expert and be able to teach me.
Yeah.
And I love being able to support that in position, them being in that position. I mean, their writing improved exponentially because they had buy-in.
Right.
And they're really good writers and very adept researchers now. But they got to be in that position of being the expert and know what that felt like.
Yeah.
And I was just so pleased for that. But I also had to choose battles
Absolutely.
very, very carefully. And there's a certain amount of chaos and mess that comes with, living with neurodivergence and creative people and having your kids around all the time and making stuff and all of that all at once. So I just let a lot go. And I think the more I was able to, the better.
Yeah.
Like we had to have clean things underneath it, but we're not going to have everything tidy and perfect all the time or anywhere near it. And I just had to be okay with that.
Oh, well, I feel that so
part
much.
Part of me is and part of me isn't, but if I could just be with them and overlook a lot of the rest, we were all happier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes it went better than other times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
myself being neurodivergent and then my daughter being neurodivergent, us like getting out on time is like a whole ordeal. Like, I mean, we literally just live outside the space-time continuum.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, and time blindness, like that is a thing. And I know with Avadia, like just trying to like, okay, in 10 minutes, we're going to put our shoes on.
Yeah.
And then we get to that spot or she'll have just heard a joke and she needs to understand it like right now.
Right now, there's no later.
Right. And, like a lot of times there are things that I want to explain to her because they have that, social side to it where if I don't explain it and she's not paying attention, she might not learn the social cue from it or whatever.
Oh, exactly.
So
strike while that iron is hot. Yeah, and that displaces other things.
Right, totally. And honestly, if she's over sensoried out and we're just trying to get out the door for school, I mean, that is so rough, because there's like basic needs that need to happen. She needs to be clothed. She needs to have
Maslow before Bloom.
Right.
Every time.
Right. She has to be able to eat something, like there's no way she can function at school if she hasn't done those things. And like the irony of it is even with like, I think about like with Ritalin, with her ADHD, like she just cannot function without it. But part of the problem is that when she wakes up in the morning, she hasn't taken it yet because she has to eat something to take it. So we have to accomplish these things without the Ritalin before she can take the Ritalin to be a healthy, functioning human.
Word problems for grown-ups.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes you cannot solve for X.
Absolutely.
Right. You might get 2 Ys out of that, and that's all you're going to have to deal with today.
Right.
Yeah. Back to the drawing board.
Right. Exactly. And, and then if she's like emotionally dysregulated by the time we get to school.
I am.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? She will not learn anything, and it's just going to be like a horrible day for her. So, no, it's definitely sometimes we do have to take that time and like keeping a super clean house. Like I used to be a neat freak. And I mean, I definitely have had messy periods of like life. Even like before we had our child, like I would, we would always have like a cleanup day on Sunday. And but now honestly, if we just have clean clothes and they're in a pile, like that is an accomplishment.
Absolutely. You're winning there.
Yeah, totally. So
folding is next level.
Right. Well, and I feel like too, like when people visit, like they know that, like we have a lot happening over here.
Yeah.
So like anybody is welcome in my house anytime.
But we're living here.
Right. But we're living here and it's probably going to be a disaster every single time. And that's okay. And it's like you said, like it's sort of that getting over it and like becoming okay with that.
I had a very hard lesson in that when I was doing my student teaching. We were switching out mattresses for the kids. We got new mattresses. We were also packing to go away for a week. And my house showed that. Everything was everywhere.
Yeah.
But someone who was student teaching next to me was falling apart.
Yeah.
And when we left school, she was a mess. I said, just come over. And I knew what we were walking into. Utter chaos. I had her over. I'm like, okay, you're going to walk into my kitchen now. Brace yourself. And
Right.
I squared my shoulders and we walked in and it was beyond chaos.
Yeah.
Beyond. Something had blown up in there and it was not getting better. And I just had to leave my pride at the door
Absolutely.
and make her a cup of tea and sit down. And she had a lot to say about that later. She said, I didn't know how I was going to get through the day. And the fact that you let me into your reality, how it really is, and you didn't try to whitewash that.
Right.
Just let me in there and made me welcome in the middle of it was a lifesaver.
Absolutely.
And that was a good thing for me to do. There's a book called Betsy Tacy, which we really love. And there was a mother in there. The new pastor's wife had just come to knock on the door, and this mother was in the middle of mopping her floors. She was wearing old clothes, her old apron, everything was wet, the furniture was all moved. She threw her apron back over her head, and she took deep breaths and cried a little. And then she wiped her eyes, and she switched her apron, and she answered the door and just said, come in. And that example for me in just this children's book, it changed something. It let me get over myself in a lot of ways that I have to keep getting over. Just
Absolutely.
come in, because this is where we are and who we are, and you're either welcome or you're not.
Absolutely.
So if I'm going to choose welcome, it's going to be how we are right now. I mean, please give me 5-minute notice, but if
Right.
and come to the front door. But but if you don't, I'm still going to let you in, and it's going to be fine.
Right. It might be my neurodivergence, but, I have friends that show up very early, or my mom, for example. I love you, Mom. But she is notorious for being very early. And, but when I have, friends show up, half an hour early or something, again, it's the getting over it. They're seeing just part of the process,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And,
I aspire to be the friend that you don't have to scramble and clean for.
Absolutely.
And I think I've gotten there. My friends know that if they feel like they have to shove stuff into things before I come, we have an issue.
Absolutely. And I think about, many of my friends, even just growing up, we all kind of fall into that category. I'd rather have you here than, feel like you have to clean for me or me there,
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
And I'm the same. When I show up in your zone, I'll have something in my hand for you, and I'll probably be wearing a fake mustache, but I'm there.
Right. Not fake mustache. I love it.
If any of my friends are hearing this, they will know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah,
I love
it happens. You'd asked about neurodivergence and how that affected us. I think that when my kids were interested in something, they knew that I was going to help to get them involved in it in some way.
Yeah.
With the outer space thing, we went to the observatory. We went to the astronomy classes and the astronomy sleepovers in the national parks and
That's
all of that
awesome.
stuff, because if I'm learning what I love, I need to help them learn how to do that too. And so we just dove in,
Yeah. That's
whatever it was.
Well, and I think that's a good point. I think with learning, first of all, I think kids are naturally curious, but I think modeling, continuing that learning and enjoying it, that's the key. Enjoying the learning is so powerful and impactful, because if kids grow up knowing that learning is fun and exciting and you can go on these adventures, they're going to want to keep doing that. And I think that that's something that is so important, especially in our sort of structured society, that it's okay to keep learning. You don't just learn a skill and do that for the rest of your life. And if you want to keep learning something, it's almost like giving permission in a way.
Yeah, I had a couple things that really brought that home to me. One was when my middle daughter had her college orientation. They said to the parents alone after the kids were out of the room, don't worry if your child does not know what they want to do, because 80% of college freshmen who have declared a major, they know what they want to do, switch. 80%.
Yep.
That just took off the pressure. And I share that with every about to graduate high school child
Right.
I can find, because they have this intense pressure on them. And the other thing was that the average adult is going to go through 6 career changes, not jobs.
Yeah.
Career changes in this day and age. And that, it sounds inflated to me, but when I look around me at the people I know, they're actually continuing to learn brand new things
Right.
throughout their lifespan. And that just opens up huge doors into, you don't have to pick the one thing. There doesn't have to be a one thing.
Right.
You can do what you want.
Right?
Yeah.
Do what you want. I think, but that's such a big thing. Even when I decided to leave, the public school scene, people were like, what? Like, what are you going to do now? And I think having to like sort of undo that, like I'm a violinist and I'm an orchestra director and I conduct orchestras, like that part of my identity, like sort of giving myself permission to like it's okay to be other things and to do other things, and like I'm not just this one person, like I have all of these things that I can tap into, and that's okay. So speaking of like living a full life, you recently just graduated with a master's degree, right?
In nursing.
Wow.
Some people might say that at my advanced age, it's too late to start an entirely different career, but here we are. And I don't feel behind, oddly enough, even though I was going to school with people significantly younger than myself.
Yeah.
Because this was my plan. Before I had kids, I knew that I was supposed to be a nurse when my kids were fully cooked.
Yeah.
And they're fully cooked. So
I love it. That's fantastic. And no, you, during COVID, you were doing some of the prerequisites and getting yourself sort of like ready for that.
Yes, so many prerequisites because those did not overlap very much or had been too long in the past for what nursing requires.
No, your bachelor's was
Music
in
ed.
music ed. That's what I thought.
And then I have an EMT licensure as well.
Okay.
But I've only volunteered with that. I haven't worked on a rig, so it's a different experience just volunteering.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been quite the ride, and I just finished in December.
And congratulations.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah.
It was really rough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, just the coursework alone, I can't even imagine. That's
interesting
amazing.
during COVID.
Yeah.
Interesting experience. It was a valuable one.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, having that, just the pressure of it and going through what other health professionals were going through, even just as a student.
Yeah.
And we were there. And now entering nursing on the other side of that to see the damage that's been done to health professionals.
Absolutely.
It's a unique time to be starting this. So
right.
I'm excited.
Yeah, well, good for you. Gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And who knows, maybe in 10 years you'll decide you want to do something else and get another degree or something.
Yeah, let's not talk about that today. Thank you. I'm not ready.
Totally.
to even hear the words. But there may be a time. We'll just pause that for now. How's that?
Right,
okay.
Absolutely.
Still
absolutely.
catching my breath here, but yeah, the whole COVID thing was an interesting time for everyone.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the free time that so many people had, or the boredom, because I was starting my prerequisites then.
Right.
And I switched to online teaching my students, and that was pretty difficult at first.
Yeah.
Even though they were only one at a time. So much credit to teachers who just pivoted.
Yeah.
And did the thing. Oh, my stars. Whole classrooms full of kids.
Right.
I'm in awe. Like, my sister did that in a day. No clue how.
Right.
She's a master teacher, and I don't know how she did the thing. I know it was very hard. But even with my one-on-one students, or two, teaching a beginner how to hold a cello properly when they're, 9.
Right.
And they're not in front of you.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, honey. I can't actually see your hand, so I can't answer that question. Can you move the camera? Yeah, all the time. But we worked it out, and I still have quite a few of those students that started at that time, which is really fun. And my son was a senior in high school, and he missed the last of his senior year.
Oh, that's hard.
But something so lovely happened during that time. One, I got more time with him, which I'm always happy about.
Absolutely.
He's just such a bright spot in my day, and I'm so grateful he's still at home.
Yeah.
But we would take out the sewing machines about 11 p.m. and start sewing masks or surgical caps or surgical gowns for units that didn't have enough.
Yeah.
And just for a couple hours every night, we would sit and sew at the kitchen table. And that's such a valuable experience for me, just to have that time with him and not having a way to really help out the medical community besides that. I felt at least I was doing something. Like, I felt this huge pull to just be where they were and helping. And my friends who had to go in, not knowing what they were bringing home, not knowing how much danger they were in. This is the one thing I had.
Right.
To help keep them safe. And my son joining me in that was just amazing.
Right.
So that was lovely.
That is lovely. And just being able to, I mean, I know when I sew with my mom, we get to like talk and hang out, and it's kind of like a party in a way,
Yeah. And a
Yeah.
good way to end every night. And then we just decide, okay, we've done enough and put them away and move on.
Yeah. That's fantastic. If you could give yourself any piece of advice before you embarked on this journey with designing your life, and I know it wasn't, not that it wasn't intentional, but like what would you tell yourself? I mean, I get that it's
for myself. Maybe to keep up with some of the structured activities that I really had in place on this piece of paper in front of you. Right? I had them in there. But when we stopped homeschooling, I didn't keep up with some of those. The intentional weekly or biweekly contact with friends, that if it's not on a schedule, you just don't get to.
Absolutely.
The Mama's Homeschool Day, well, I wasn't homeschooling and I didn't quite do that. Now, I found new ways to do those things, but some of them were just so crucial and vibrant and important. Exercise. Oops. We're trying to add that one back in, but that's a really, really tough one. I love my couch so much. So it's something, thanks for asking. It's something I really need to think more about. But I think keeping up the things that were working for my kids, they were also working for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to take some revisiting.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. That's good advice because I think about I'm sort of at the beginning of this journey. And, I do think that there are a lot of structure things from when I was teaching in the public schools that were working for me. And it's good to keep up with that because I think about myself in 10 years from now. What are the things that I should be keeping and what are the things that, I can.
And there's that retrospective view, right?
Right.
And I need to do that now in a way that is about me and my family where it's at now. Helping take care of my granddaughter. What does that look like? What does that look like healthy for her, healthy for me, healthy for my kids?
Right.
In a way that I'm continuing to model the things that I want to be an important part of her. How am I supporting my kids as they're raising kids?
Yeah.
To be able to have that margin, to be healthy too. But I think that I need to get some more time with that. I decided that now I'm in my 20s because my 20s was all doing this. And that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But now I'm in my 20s, you see. So I went to grad school.
Yeah.
And now that I'm in my 20s, I'm going away for the weekend to do crafts with friends.
I love that.
Yeah. And I'm doing a little traveling here and there. And just the stuff that I may have done otherwise.
Yeah.
Not that it was a sacrifice, because I don't feel like it's that way. It just feels like now's the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm being intentional about that, but I do want to do a little bit more, like you're talking about. In 10 years, what should this time have looked like? And how will I know that it's met the things that are being asked of me? How will I know that I'm answering that?
Yeah.
So I'll do more thinking.
Yeah.
Great, you made me think. Thanks.
I know. What can I say? Educator. I
always appreciate
you can
that.
take the girl out of the public school, but you can't take the educator out of the girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's something that I ask myself a lot, looking, again, that retrospective, what will I be glad that I've done and what are the things that are missing that I should be trying to implement into my life. And I think, especially with structure, I think for me, it's so hard because structure is both the best and the worst thing that can happen to me.
Double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword. And, especially with my health stuff, there are days where there's no way I'm going to be able to do my schedule and I have to just listen to my body and do what is good for my body. But other days, there are days where just mentally I have to make myself do the structure.
Right.
And especially with ADHD, it can be really hard and just a huge, and even things that I enjoy, you just have to get started on this thing. And once you get going, you'll be fine,
Oh, taxes.
Yeah, taxes. Oh, yeah.
Have mercy. With a small business, it's insanity and it tries to kill me every year. And I will procrastinate like you wouldn't believe with that.
Us too.
Yeah.
And luckily, like Scott is really good about okay, we need to get these things together.
3 points for you.
You're right.
You want to come and do that for me?
Right.
I'm free on Thursday.
Well, and there's so many little things. I mean, this is the first year too with tie-dye where we had to separate our personal finance from our business. And not that I don't have experience with that from teaching privately, which is my main source of income right now. But it was definitely like, oh, okay, it's different too, because like, you know, I'm providing like an item, and you know,
and you're switching from hobby to career in a way too.
Right.
Yeah.
And
paperwork wise, mentally, the whole thing is a big switch.
Right. Yeah. And even, you know, like with teaching violin, like I don't have, you know how you have to like, if you become like a small business, you're supposed to like register your business.
Yep.
And it's not like a huge deal. It's not like, you know, I'm a corporation or anything. But with the private teaching, I've never had to do that. But with the tie-dye, I did have to do that this past year. And that was like a whole, like, I am so abstract random. And to have to like figure out like these government websites and like, and luckily one of our neighbors, again, co-housing for the win.
Nice.
One of our co-housing neighbors is a lawyer, and she's actually like, she works with like businesses. So I am so glad, because she gave me a lot of good solid counsel on like what I needed to do, and even just understanding the like jargon that's on paperwork and stuff.
Did I mention I'm free on Thursday?
Right. Exactly. So no, it's definitely, yeah. So it's a learning. It's all a learning journey.
Yep.
And I do feel sometimes like, in a good way though, I feel like I'm like Frodo with like the ring, you know?
You're always Frodo with the ring, Marianne.
Right. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Except I don't want to have to go to Mordor. That's... Yeah.
No, let's vacation elsewhere.
Yeah, let's fit, like, Hawaii sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, or you know, just even up north where it's beautiful. So, yeah. So, well, good. Well, Kora, is there anything else you'd like to tell us today?
I would love to give parents permission to take the time to play in front of their kids. You know, I'm not qualified to give advice to anyone, but I would give encouragement that if you don't know what you love to do, what are other people around you loving to do? Might you love that? Experiment, play, show them that it's okay to not know the things that are true about yourself yet, but let them into that process, because when they get to that point, and they will, usually middle school, high school, who am I and what do I love, and who do I translate that into as a vocation and as hobbies and as the life that I have? If they see you going through that and you're open about it and invite them into that, I don't think it makes them insecure. I think it gives them permission to go through that and know it's okay, it's normal, and you're going to get there, and we're going to go with you through it because you went through it with me. And I want that for my kids. I want that for my granddaughter. I want that for my nieces and nephews. And they have to watch me to know that it's okay to not know yet, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to keep working on it until we do. So, well, I'd love that permission just to be universal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kora, for being a guest today. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your ideas and your process and your journey. And I really feel like I am so inspired by you, like every day, like for real.
That's so kind.
And
thank you.
Yeah. And in a way, I feel like it really, really helped me start to build the life that I wanted, you know, with a little more balance. And
Marianne, that's huge. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and going over the life that I've had and talking to you about it. It's easy just to focus on the things I missed. Yeah. And the arrows didn't quite get their mark, and the mistakes that I've made. And you made me talk about the other stuff, and that's a kindness in itself. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You're welcome. So much gratitude for me. Kora performs regularly with the Roseville String Ensemble and the Firefly Trio, and you can find her at www.thefireflytrio.com, as well as the trio's Facebook page, The Firefly Trio. Thanks for joining us, and as always, you can find me at madmiredi.com. Madmir will be back next week with a fresh podcast where we explore the challenges and victories to building sustainable lifestyles as independent makers, small artists, and entrepreneurs.